So let me show you this email that I got. Hold on. This is the email that I got. All right. I'm a libertarian capitalist who destroys MLs daily. He goes, infrared. People call me anomaly. I've been running a political Discord for a while and was informed that you're the new ML in town. I'm emailing you to officially challenge you to a debate. I've looked up your content and you don't debate capitalists much. Let me know when you have time to debate so I can quickly destroy you. So I was excited when I saw this. Free content, man. I didn't have any content lined up for today, so free content, you know? I was super excited. I was like, okay, debate me tonight. Join VC when you're ready. And then he responded, just joined. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do an early stream because this is free content, dude. Free content. Okay, before we begin, because I'm going to actually just get right into this, like right now. Oh yeah, look how he says after I just very formally, coldly said, just join VC when you're ready. He has to fucking cheerlead himself in the email. Like, he has to mentally prep himself sending the email to, dude, who are you cheerleading? You're sending this to me. Sharks eat gorillas! Does that make you feel better? Does that make you feel better? He's mentally prepping himself for what? We'll see when we debate. What are you prepping yourself for, little boy? Okay. Anyway, JC Dem, appreciate it.
Jason Tons 12 donated $5. He is a moron. Sharks cannot survive on land. Obviously, they would lose to monkeys.
No, I'll be any type of gorilla. I'll be an aquatic gorilla and I'll go into the fucking sea and rip a shark in half. Anyway, let me just say something. Usually I'm more polite to right-wingers. But wow. If you email me promising to destroy me, wow. You better. You better. You really better destroy me. I don't care who the fuck you are. Because I'm not going to show you any mercy. All politeness is off. You say you're going to destroy me. This guy doesn't even know who the fuck I am. He just knows I call myself an ML. Beyond that, he doesn't even know who I am. He doesn't even know my ideas, my positions, nothing. But he thinks he's going to destroy me. Wow. I hope, I pray for your own sake, for your own manhood, that you know what you're talking about when you say that. Because if you don't destroy me, and if you don't do it quickly, your manhood belongs to me. You understand? When you talk a big game, you have to follow through with it. If you don't follow through with it, your manhood belongs to me. I'm going to address your political discord directly now. People of Anomaly's political discord. If Anomaly fails in doing his job tonight, I want you to know officially that I own Anomaly's manhood. All of his credibility, all of his infamy on that discord, all of his followers, I will be your follower. I will be your alpha. I will be your king. If he does not follow through with destroying me,
donated $5. Gorillas slay sharks.
Then I own that whole server. You become my follower. You come to my fucking Discord. You understand? That's what we're fighting about. You become my follower. He forfeits his manhood. He will become my court eunuch. Alright, I'm gonna bring him in now. Anomaly, I know your bitch ass must be watching this. Get in show queue right now. Get in show queue. I'm gonna drag you up. We're gonna do this right now. Anomaly, where the fuck are you? Show queue now. Based. Thank you, Indigo Placebo. Sin, get the fuck out of show Q, you fucking idiot. Anomaly, get in show Q. Here he is. I'm dragging him up now. Unmute. Hello? No, I can't hear you. I can't hear a word you're saying. Fix your mic. You're supposed to be an infamous guy on Discord, so you know how Discord works. Fix your mic. You're a Discord debate, Andy. Your mic doesn't even work? Now he's both mute. He muted himself and he also deafened himself. So nothing works. Already off to a bad start, honestly. Hello? Nope, can't hear a word. Hello? No, your mic does not work. There is literally nothing coming out of your mic. Hello? I thought you were a capitalist. Can't capitalists afford mics that work? Raise your mic volume. You're barely audible. Raise it up all the way. But it worked then. I heard you then. Where did he go? He left. Where did he go? He's probably... I'm gonna guess he's gonna go fix it and he's gonna come back. Just wait. Alright, he's back. He's back. Hello? Nope, it doesn't work. You had it working before you left, but it was too quiet. Yeah, hello? Okay, raise your mic volume all the way. You're barely audible. Can you talk louder? You can talk louder? Let me ask the audience. Speak.
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
How's this? How's this, guys?
Hello? Hello?
You can hear him? Okay, I'm gonna put a filter on and I'm gonna put the gain on a little more. Talk again.
Hello? Hello?
Talk again.
Hello?
How's that? Talk.
Hello?
It's good now? Okay, I put the filter on. Okay, Anomaly! You sent me the email that you're gonna come destroy me quickly, so have at it, my friend.
Alright, so just a little backstory on what's happened. I've been getting a lot of your fans in my Discord. And, you know, they've just been wanting to debate me super hard. So I was like, you know what? Let me just get to the source and stop debating these little chumps. So here I am.
Okay, have at it, my friend.
Alright, so basically, when I debate these losers constantly, they just keep LARPing about
Are you
China
going to keep
over and
bitching
over
about
again.
other people, or are you going to debate me? I'm not here to talk to you about my fans. You're here to debate me, my positions, my ideas. I'm sure you've done your research, so have at it, my friend.
Alright, so, I mean, I guess we could specifically talk about China.
Sure.
Since that's what you guys like to talk about so much. So, basically, just based on my framework, I don't really see China as... China basically is not what you guys think it is kind of my point. China is basically prospering right now because of how capitalist they are.
And India is not capitalist?
And what? What did you say?
Is India capitalist?
Yeah, I guess.
So why isn't India prospering in the same way China is?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying all capitalists are equal. I'm saying China.
They're not all equal. Do you think China, in your view, since China's capitalist, is it more or less capitalist than America?
I would say in a way it's more.
That's interesting. Because do you know the proportion of the China's economy, which is governed by or held by state-owned enterprises, SOEs? Do you have those in America, SOEs? Do you have the same level of intervention into the economy in America that you do in China? Do the Chinese exercise the same amount of control over capitalists as the American government does over its own capitalists?
No, I mean China.
Obviously, it doesn't. So no, we're not going to pretend here that China is more capitalist than America. Now, China might have a more dynamic market economy. It might have a more dynamic kind of grassroots and pro-people policy where, they don't have this government red tape bureaucracy that fleeces the people on the ground. But by no means is China some kind of libertarian capitalist economy. And despite that, it seems like you agree that China is in a very well flourishing, very dynamic and very prosperous economy, if among the most in the whole fucking world.
Yeah, I do agree, but I think China's doing so. They're allowing for the average person to actually trade, and that's what America doesn't allow.
But I don't see. But according to the Chinese themselves, so I don't know what other authority you need. According to the Chinese themselves, markets are not incompatible with socialism.
Okay, well that's not what I hear from all these lefties I debate. But
don't talk about the lefties. Talk about the source. And by the way, Anomaly, you do not sound like you have the same level of confidence and certainty that you did when you sent me that email. I'm hearing a lot of I thinks and what ifs. You sound like you're nervous a little bit. You sound very quiet and tame. Why didn't you approach me with the same level in your email that you're talking to me now? Where's all that bravado that you had when you were typing on your keyboard?
Well, I mean, I guess we wouldn't be debating if I was passive, right? We're debating here right now.
Well, if this is how you're going to get my attention, don't take what you can't dish out, because I'm going to give you exactly what you were looking for and asking for. Then I'm not going to be polite to you. I'm not going to show you any mercy, little boy.
That's fine. That's fine. I didn't ask for it.
So go on, continue.
All right. So my overall point about China is, yes, they are authoritarian, and yes, they do intervene more than the U.S. does, but they allow for the average person to trade. The U.S. does not.
What's your point? Wait. The U.S. does not allow for the average person to trade?
Not when their governments collude with already established big corporations to.
No, I agree. China's, but here's what you're missing though, and this again, Chinese Marxists are going to tell you the same thing. The reason why China doesn't have these, this red tape bureaucracy colluding with this overwhelming power of monopoly capital is because the Chinese state, which calls itself a socialist state, elevates itself above the interests of any particular economic interest and is able to use its overwhelming state power to stop big monopolies forming, which do choke and hamper the small guy from being able to trade and participate in the economy. So as you can see, a very strong socialistic state and ruled by a communist party is perfectly compatible with the little guy being able to trade and flourish on a real market rather than the fake market and monopoly capitalism we have here in the United States.
Yeah, but China could at whim come down on any company if they want it.
Exactly.
For whatever reason.
It's because of that, but that's the exact reason why the little guy in China has a chance, unlike in America, as you pointed out. It's thanks to socialism that that's the case.
Yeah, but the way they intervene is not capitalist in any way.
Of course it's not, because China is a socialist country. That's my position. That's been my position from the start.
And so you're saying the U.S. is not a socialist country. That's what you're saying.
It's not, no.
So all of these Biden handouts that's been happening over the last year, you're saying that's not socialist at all?
No, socialism is not printing money and giving handouts to the population whimsically. Socialism is far more dynamic and complicated than that. I think that what's going on in America is more the economy of a collapsing empire. I wouldn't say that's socialism. China's a thriving socialist state. The
So
Soviet
Biden's
Union,
infrastructure.
everyone
So
agrees the Soviet Union.
Biden's infrastructure.
Stop
plans are
interrupting me,
not
little
socialist.
boy. Everyone agrees the Soviet Union was a socialist state, but the Soviet Union didn't just print out money and give handouts. So I don't see what's so socialistic about Biden's policies whatsoever.
So you're saying Biden's infrastructure programs are not socialist in any way?
No, even if Biden was able to pass every facet and aspect of his so-called infrastructure plan, that would not equal socialism, because socialism is a system, not a policy or set of policies. Socialism is a specific relationship between a government or a state and, for example, the economy. And the U.S. does not possess that relationship. Even if Biden was able to shit out money and throw his money wherever he wants to, it would not establish the same relationship to the economy that the Chinese state has, because ultimately the U.S. government is controlled by private interests who come from the U.S. economy, by financial capital, by Wall Street, by the banks. It's a completely different system. You know, the government can decide to throw money at this or that place. That doesn't make it more or less socialist. It just means it's using its money in this or that way that it has. It doesn't change the underlying systemic realities.
All right. Well, let's get to the root of your. So, what issues do you have with libertarians in general?
Libertarians seem very diverse, but my issue with libertarianism is its one-sidedness. It doesn't understand the dialectic we just went over about how you need a very strong, powerful, and even socialist state that looks out for the interests of the people in order to curb the inevitable, and yes, inevitable growth of monopolies that arises from a normal capitalist economy. In order to maintain a moderately free market, you need a very strong and powerful state to curb the power of the various private interests that may emerge in the economy. I think American libertarians should help us reforge the Communist Party, because the Communist Party will allow for what the libertarians really want, which is they want to get rid of the state bureaucratic red tape. They want to get rid of the monopolies that are hurting the small guy. And they want to get the government off the backs of the people on an everyday local level. These are perfectly compatible with what communists want. Communists don't want the government to intervene and lord over people at the local and small level. Actually, if you look at China's governance, China's a very localistic type of state. China allows people, the Chinese government is not on people's back at the local level. It's very much promotes a culture of self-governance, and which is, of course, maintained by culture and other things. So that's my view of libertarianism. I don't think And another thing, too, is that even if we assume all of the values of the libertarians are correct, I don't believe American libertarians will ever accomplish any of their real goals. And it's simply because of that same one-sidedness. Libertarians don't recognize the necessity of maintaining a strong state, powerful state.
Yeah, but states inevitably become corrupt. That's sort of the point.
Even if states inevitably do become corrupt, the process of fighting corruption from the grassroots level, the level of the people, would become an inevitable part of the life cycle of a state. Actually, the conception of a state as a static thing is very modern. There's pre-modern views of a state which is cyclical, that states become corrupt, the people put the state in check and somehow, and the cycle continues. I'll give you concrete examples of this from China alone. After the 1949 rise to acquisition of power by the Communist Party of China, the Chinese bureaucracy, Soviet-inspired bureaucracy, was pretty corrupt in many ways, especially at the local level when they were ruling over peasants. The Cultural Revolution was precisely about people rising up and challenging that corruption, and they did. Just recently, Xi Jinping got to power on an anti-corruption campaign. He fought and rooted out corruption within the Chinese government. So instead of thinking this is a static thing, corruption, if it's inevitable, should be thought of as in a cyclical way. Corruption may inevitably occur, but at the same time, anti-corruption campaigns will inevitably arise. That's because in a communist state, the state does not consider itself all-powerful. The state recognizes that its power lies in the people. So there's a dynamic, ever-changing relationship between the state and the people. The state, unlike in America and in Western countries, doesn't pretend like it exists independently of the people and has no material foundation in the people.
So then how do you know that China's not corrupt right now? How do you determine that? China could be corrupt right now.
Well, how would you like to measure it? Because I think by any corruption index, you will find that China is far less corrupt than it was before Xi Jinping assumed power.
But how do you prove that?
Maybe there is corruption within China, but who's to say that corruption will not fall victim to another anti-corruption campaign in the future? This is the business of the Chinese people. Certainly when the Chinese people find out about any instance of corruption, there is social media, grassroots, and so on campaigns and public pressure to see justice done and see them removed. So if there's corruption going on in China, it's just that the Chinese people don't know about it, which is possible, but what's the point?
Well, I mean, the point is, if you can't see corruption, if it's at a local level, you might not be able to see it from a national level, but there could still be corruption.
I don't think so, because China's, especially with the new social media culture, China seems like internally, seems like in terms of the public perception, governance in China is pretty transparent. If there's local abuses going on, it gains national attention and public outcry. This has happened multiple times actually in China's history since the reform and opening up, even before the Xi era.
Okay, so you're saying that China is able to detect corruption efficiently. You're saying they're that efficient.
Much more efficiently than in the United States and elsewhere. Here in the United States, we have all sorts of corrupt we have the Clinton machine, we have all sorts of corrupt entities and corruption going on here in the United States, which the public doesn't even know about, no one even cares about. The government in the United States doesn't even make it a formal priority to root out corruption because it doesn't even recognize any corruption. Meanwhile, in China, even if you're going to argue that there's still corruption, which there may very well be, at least the Chinese government has made it almost a very top priority to root out corruption. It's an official, formal goal of the government is to root out corruption. We don't have that in America.
I mean, the people in America know that the government's corrupt.
Of course, but the government here doesn't even pretend to work for the people in America. At least in China, the government's only official purpose is to serve the people.
So what you're saying is China is more libertarian than the U.S. is what
I
you're
think
saying.
So, yes.
With a big state.
Of course.
All right, and you're justifying that by saying that the Chinese government could come in and break up big companies. That's
an example of it, yes, and it also has a very wealthy, grassroots, popular culture of participating in civic life, holding corrupt entities accountable. The Chinese people, unlike what Western media was trying to say for the past few decades, are not a passive flock of sheep. They know they have a voice, they have opinions about their own country, and China's not perfect. I'm not trying to say it's perfect, but I think American libertarians would be much more interested in learning from China than they would learning from Europe or learning from wherever else, example.
Okay, and what if China decides to intervene in a small company, for whatever reason, culturally or
here's the thing: the people who are doing the intervention are government officials, and they're accountable to somebody. So they have to have a pretty good reason for doing anything they do. If they can't come up with a reason, there's going to be a problem. Now, if they're doing it for self-interested, private reasons as a government official, that would be an example of corruption. But we've already talked about corruption and its significance within China. So the Chinese government does not act arbitrarily. Its only official purpose is to serve the Chinese people.
Yeah, but you do understand that the politicians are still humans. So they're,
yeah, of course.
But when we let the markets decide, that's demands of many people.
But you can't let a market decide when it comes to governance and statehood.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning, what do you mean? What would be the alternative? If markets inevitably lead to monopolies, markets inevitably
like
lead to
infrastructure,
conditions.
for example, infrastructure.
Sorry,
you're letting like infrastructure. We can let private companies build roads and bridges and whatever else that China builds instead of.
Well, then why don't they? Where in the world do you find an example of private companies being able to build infrastructure with the level of efficiency that China does?
Well, they can't right now because the Western governments are so involved. But I'm saying if you let everything
go, the
go,
buck stops somewhere. The buck has to stop somewhere, and the fact of the matter is that private companies would be much less adept at building infrastructure because infrastructure doesn't work like a market. You don't, for example, when you drive on the highway, it's not a market decision. When you get your drinking water, it's not a market decision. Infrastructure is not a matter of going to a bazaar and making a consumer choice.
But businesses need those things, so they would inevitably build it. Google would build a road if they needed to get from one place to another. They would do it.
Okay, what's your point? But Google doesn't do that because Google relies on the infrastructure that already exists.
Yeah, but that's
which is much more efficient from a business perspective. They don't have to waste expenses. And that's why China's infrastructure policies are much more friendly to businesses because businesses don't have to create a state on their own. They can let the state take care of that at no cost to themselves besides taxes and stuff. And they won't have to build their own infrastructure.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean... So you're saying that Google could not build a road that's as good as what we have now. That's what you're saying.
Maybe they could. Listen, anyone with money can maybe do anything. Maybe they could. Maybe they couldn't. But let me tell you, there's multiple layers to this. So let's take roads alone, for example, right? For Google to build its own infrastructure, Google needs educated people. It needs people who know how to build roads and so on. It needs that kind of things, right? It needs ownership of land, the land necessary to build the roads on. Somewhere along the lines, the buck stops somewhere where it requires some kind of state infrastructure, state institutions, which build the infrastructure for this to be possible. Because Google cannot build a state of its own, which provides complete education over how infrastructure works, technical engineers, provides all the raw materials necessary, secures the flow of raw materials, the supply chains that allow those to be... Somewhere along the line, the buck stops at geopolitics, statehood, things like that. And this is the significance of infrastructure in general. Maybe Google could build... Now, I'll tell you what's going on in America. The reason why we all suspect that Google would do a better job at building infrastructure than governments would in America is because our state in America is very outdated in general. Our laws are outdated, our government is outdated, and our infrastructure is definitely outdated. So if Google undertook the project of building its own infrastructure, it probably would maybe be better than the current infrastructure that exists now. But that would come at a tremendous cost to Google. I don't think Google would want to undertake that cost. I think Google wants the government to take care of that kind of thing so that Google can focus on the things that Google...
they build campuses all across the world. And they foot that bill.
But their campuses are for working at Google.
Yeah, but I'm saying they can build it without taking 10 years like it does in the U.S. or 20 years or 30 years.
Sure, the U.S., the government in the U.S. is very outdated, but the government in China is not outdated like it is in the U.S. The infrastructure builders in China, their method and their ways is not outdated like it is in the U.S. China's an example of a state. China's state-owned enterprises and China's infrastructure building is an example of a state sector of the economy that in the world that is not actually outdated with regard to the private sector.
Yeah, but when you say China, well, first, when I say efficient, what I mean is it's the quality of what they're building and also how timely they're building it at. So you're saying that China is able to build infrastructure better than Google would be able to.
I think they are. Yes, if you look at the record, look at the China's look at the past decade or two and how long it took China to create an extensive countrywide high-speed rail network. That is no easy task, my friend. That's not something countries do with ease. China is known and renowned throughout the world for the efficiency and speed with which it is able to build infrastructure.
I just don't find that moral that the government is doing this.
Why is it immoral?
Individuals should be able to determine.
You think that if a private company is building infrastructure, that this is an individual's doing? It's not an individual's doing. It's never an example of an individual.
The company started from an individual point of view. It started from a couple of people, right? It started from a founder.
The Communist Party was started from a few people. What's the point?
Yeah, but the Communist Party were elected. They didn't produce anything. They're not producers. Google only got to where they are because they provided.
I don't see what's so individual about Google whatsoever. Google is a company that's not controlled by any one individual, never was. And by the way, no individual made Google possible. A series of investors made Google possible. Not to discount the countless engineers and all those people who made it possible. It wasn't any one individual who made Google possible.
It's individual in the sense that it's by individual people that came up with
governments are by individual people as well.
Yeah, but the way of markets and the way free markets work.
Do you seriously believe that Google emerged out of a free market? Google was made possible by the infrastructure and network created between the United States, the military, and the research institutions during the Cold War. This is the infrastructure that made Google possible in the first place. Furthermore, do you really want to lead us to believe that Google arose out of some kind of consumer bazaar free market? No, Google arose out of a combination of government monopoly, shareholders and investors, and speculators who have nothing to do with any market that's accessible by an ordinary people. So no, what you're saying is patently false. These big companies, these big tech companies are the worst example you're using of private enterprise and free markets, because the goddamn truth of the matter is that we as consumers don't really choose what these companies are even able to do. We don't even have a choice. Do you think the masses are happy with the big tech censorship that's going on?
I mean, not necessarily.
They're not, but we don't have an alternative. We have no alternative. There's no free market to choose an alternative to that.
You don't have to use Google.
You don't, but you're going to be isolated from the world. And I know about all of the alternative websites right-wingers like to use. They like to use, Gab and what else? But those are failures. They're all failures.
But they're still alternatives. And there's
but they're not alternatives that will ever able to rival these monopolies, these big tech monopolies.
I mean, but that's the market, right? People get to decide.
This is where you got it wrong, because it's precisely not because of the market, because these big tech companies have a monopoly, and this monopoly goes very deep. It's not just that people prefer to use them. They have partnerships with other companies. They have special relationships with the government. They have special relationships with the local governments of countries, whole states, like in California. So no, Google and these Facebook and all these big tech companies have not gained the prominence they have because of the free market. They've done so because of their monopolies.
I mean, I do agree that the U.S. has definitely been a huge investor in some of these companies. But that's just because that's what we live in right now in America. But what I'm saying is, even if it was a completely free market, Google and Amazon and these companies would still be large. And they would still
but they're monopolies.
They're
monopolies which hurt free markets.
Yeah, but again, if the customers are deciding which product is better, if Google always has a better search engine, I'm fine with people choosing Google over another platform.
So why do you have a problem if the overwhelming majority of Chinese people choose socialism with Chinese characteristics?
I mean, I'm not anti-China in the sense that most, libertarian right-wingers are. I mean, I don't really care what China does. They can do whatever they want with their own country. But I'm saying here in America, because we do already have a more of a free market system already. I'm saying we just need to abolish a lot of these government programs.
But we don't have a free market economy in America. You just told me we didn't.
More than China.
Because we
I'm
don't
saying
allow
more
the
than
small
China.
traders to have a chance here. That was your words, not my words.
No, what I'm saying is, but I'm saying if we abolish a lot of these laws and policies that we have in place, it would go back to like the the late 1800s type of America.
The late 1800s is what gave rise to the America we know of now. The late 1800s was the era in which monopolies arose, and monopolies were only able to be challenged by the power of government. So I agree, there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy in America that doesn't need to be there. I 100% agree with that. But one-sidedly saying you're just going to get rid of those and let things be, to me, you're just going to end up with a catastrophic situation in which you're going to have the unfettered rule of monopolies, and it's going to stifle the ability for ordinary people to have a chance.
But can you agree that could have been technological too? You don't know that if that would be the case now. The individual
What would be the
person
case?
has a lot more. The individual person has a lot more at their disposal that they didn't have in those times. They didn't
What
have
do you
cell
mean?
phones. Whether it's cell phones, whether it's the ability for them to be independent contractors like you probably are as a streamer, you weren't able to do this before. So even if we had zero laws or all of these crazy policies that we have in place, you would still be able to make money on Twitch. Nothing's stopping you.
No, I
More
wouldn't.
free.
I really wouldn't, because Twitch, you're trying to isolate something from the greater whole. You're not seeing the bigger picture. You're not seeing the bigger picture and how big tech, as it currently exists, relies upon the government to maintain itself.
So you're saying that Twitch wouldn't exist without the government?
I don't think it would. No.
How do you justify that? You can just say that, but there's no. I don't see any proof behind that.
Okay, sure. What makes Twitch possible? Let's begin from there.
Before even Amazon bought it, Twitch was it started from the ground, right?
Sure. What makes Twitch possible?
What do you mean by that? What you mean technologically, or the company?
Any kind of way.
Just the advancement of technology. There are a couple of guys.
Let's be specific.
What I mean is a couple of guys, entrepreneurs, started a company to allow people to stream on their platform.
Okay, you sound like a guy who's never looked at the ground upon which their feet stands. You think that you're just floating in midair. You don't stand on some kind of ground.
So you're saying even for the ability...
Be more specific. What makes Twitch possible?
What do you mean by that?
The internet is what makes Twitch possible.
Okay.
Who created the internet?
Okay, the government. Yeah.
Okay. What else? Okay, let's forget about the technological software side of things. Even though we're skipping a lot of important details, let's look at the hardware side of things. What makes the internet possible?
So you're wanting me to debate from what happened. I'm saying
what makes the internet possible?
Isn't Elon Musk shooting up?
What makes the internet possible? Can you answer?
What do you mean by that?
Computers.
Okay. So yeah, governments created a lot of these things.
It's not just that governments created them. It's that the supply chains necessary for our computers to be built are geopolitically maintained by the American state and negotiated at the level of the American state. If you don't have a state, your supply chains that allow you to secure the raw materials necessary to even build the fucking things falls apart.
How? So you're saying that there wouldn't be supply?
Because the U.S. government is what negotiates on the world level, or negotiates is maybe a bad word because that assumes they're doing so as equals. They're using their big stick to make American companies have the best deal when it comes to securing raw materials.
Okay, but
to build the fucking computers.
Individual
trade. You don't know about the significance of government in relation to negotiating trade?
Individual companies could do the exact same things you're saying.
No, they can't. An individual company would never be able to establish something like the IMF. An individual company would never be able to establish something like the World Trade Organization. An individual company would never be able to do something like negotiate the level at which countries participating can institute tariffs and all that kind of stuff.
In a way, transnational corporations could do those things.
They couldn't. How could they? without being sovereign political states and powers in and of themselves. Because remember, these are things, trade policy is something a sovereign state does to overdetermine what the companies within it are allowed to do. Not just one company choosing for itself what it's going to do, but all the companies within the state.
Yeah, you're explaining what's happening now, which I don't disagree with. What I'm saying is if we were in a more free market society, we could still do those things.
No, okay, how could you? Please give me a hypothetical example of how you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying like the internet, how the government created internet and whatnot, which is obviously true. But I
said a whole lot of things. I talked about the supply chains. I talked about the relationship between trade policy that makes it all possible in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, all of that. But I'm saying individuals can do that too. You see Elon Musk, starting his own...
Elon Musk would not be more than a fucking sewer rat were it not for the U.S. government subsidies and funding he received. Were it not for the partnerships and collaboration he's able to establish with NASA, his fucking rockets would never be able to leave the ground. So no, Elon Musk is not an example of an individual just doing things on his own. That's probably the worst example you could give me. But even if it was, Elon Musk, again, relies upon the trade policies, the monopolies and state policies at the level of the U.S. government geopolitically that allows him to have anything in the first place. I'll give you an example of this. What does Elon Musk need for his cars? He needs lithium. Where do you find lithium? Well, you find it in other countries. One of those countries is Bolivia. The U.S. helped orchestrate a coup in Bolivia so Elon Musk could have access to the lithium there. How is Elon Musk going to do that all by himself? He needs a state to do it.
So you're saying individual companies can't negotiate with states? Is that what you're saying?
No, not with the efficacy that which states are going to. And by the way, you're going to create a chaotic scenario. If states are only going to be able to negotiate with individual companies, somewhere along the line there's going to be a conflict of interest because there's millions and millions of companies and there's only one state they're negotiating with. It doesn't make any sense for... This would never be able to replace trade policies and bilateral agreements between states when it comes to trade.
I mean, depending on the size of the corporation, it could basically sort of have the power of the state.
No, it couldn't.
I mean, it could.
It would not be a state then. In no meaningful sense would it be a state.
If there is only one company out there that is shooting satellites up into space, they're gonna, whether it's if it's a company, they're gonna negotiate with Bolivia, for example, and it's gonna be just that one company doing so. I mean, companies.
What does this company exist in the Aether? Which country is this company based in?
I mean, in this hypothetical, I guess it would be the U.S. or what.
So the U.S. You don't think that Tesla has to comply with the United States national security regime? You don't think that Tesla has to comply with the interests of what's established by the U.S. government? You don't think that the U.S. government itself is what's propping up Tesla?
I mean, it is right now, yeah. But that's because we're in crony capitalism, as you mentioned earlier. But I'm saying in my ideal society, there would be no state doing that. I'm saying individual corporations would have the ability to negotiate. And guess what?
But I think that's precisely where we're finding a problem here. You're saying my ideal society, but as an individual, your perspective is very limited. You're not taking into account into how all of these things you're describing rely and interdepend upon each other. It's easy from your individual perspective to isolate one thing and say, oh, I just want that without all the blemishes. Oh, I just want the ice cream without the cows that make it possible, without the grass that feeds those cows. You're isolating one thing that you like from the greater whole with which it depends. This is why it's wrong to think in terms of individually contrived ideals. And it's important to take into account a more material, scientific analysis of the greater whole.
Well, I think individuals are smart enough to, even if we didn't have a state, individuals would be smart enough to be able to...
You speak of individuals as though an individual isn't a being that's crawled out of some woman's pussy. You're speaking of an individual like an individual doesn't have a mother. You're speaking of an individual as if an individual raises and clothes themselves. You're speaking of an individual as though at one point in their life they weren't a screaming infant that was absolutely nothing. There's no such thing as an isolated individual in the history of humanity. And there's certainly no such thing as an isolated individual when it comes to modern economies of scale. Individuals rely upon... Now, of course, individual brilliance is a huge part of the world and of societies.
Yeah, but
an individual initiative is a huge factor. But individuals alone can't do anything.
Your society caps that intelligence by individuals.
How is that?
Because of the state. The state.
But China is an example. China can't possibly be pointed out as an example in which individual talent or initiative is somehow stifled. China is an example of a country which draws out the brilliance and initiative of individuals in a way that is more than America can.
I mean, you can say that, but you don't know that. Because an individual person...
the state of Chinese society and its economy speaks quite plainly for itself. So I think I can say that.
Yeah, but you don't know what policies the Chinese state has put in place that has stifled progress for an individual person that was affected by that policy.
Then find them and point them out and raise it as an issue with Chinese researchers and academics who would be more than interested in hearing what you have to say if it's an original and profound point. China's not interested in closing its ears from the truth. If you have something to say, if you have some concrete evidence that China's stifling individual brilliance in a concrete way, go bring it up with Chinese academics and researchers, and they'll hear you out.
I'm not saying just China. I'm saying the state itself will stifle some individuals' freedom enough so to where they will.
Why is it necessarily the state which is going to do that? Can't time and circumstance itself do that?
Yeah, but that's something we don't have control over.
I don't see how the state necessarily stifles individual talent. I can see how it can do that, but only insofar as the state colludes with the prevailing economic powers that be. If the state works in the interests of the people at the expense of those prevailing economic powers, then as a matter of fact, the state is probably the only instrument with which individuals can be freed from the shackles of the everyday institutional and established economic powers and burdens which do stifle their ability to draw out their potential. So I think the state is actually a weapon with which individuals can express their inherent and latent potentials.
Okay, so when a state goes to war with another state and bombs and kills millions of people, those millions of people that they killed, you're telling me that they didn't objectively, stifle some individual...
On whose behalf does America go to war and kill millions of people?
Yeah, I'm not saying just...
It's on behalf of what?
Oil.
It's on behalf of oil cartels. It's on behalf of Wall Street. It's on behalf of the rich and the powerful and the established economic interests that be. China isn't a country that goes in and bombs millions of people.
Yeah, I'm not saying China specifically. I'm saying the state itself.
But the states, we can actually confine the realm of states who do that to a limited set.
Yeah, let's use the U.S. The U.S. does it all the time. They kill millions of people.
Right.
You're telling me Arabic people from all over the world, kids that are bombed and killed, you're telling me that potential wasn't spoiled?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying the state is the one that has the power.
Yeah, like I said, the state in collusion with established economic powers and interests. That's what I said already.
Okay. So you do agree to an extent that the state will stifle progress to some degree?
The state, only insofar as it is in collusion with the established economic powers, yes, is a profound tool with which progress, development, and human flourishing is stifled. America is an example of that. But all I'm trying to say is that this is not something specific to states in the abstract or states in and of themselves, but a state, rather, which is consolidated and controlled and serves the interests of established economic powers. This does not reflect on states in general.
Okay, so you're saying that states like China is sort of set up to where that couldn't be allowed, is what you're saying. So if they were to ever go to war with another state, for example, this hasn't happened now, but if they were to ever go to war with another state, you're telling me that I'm saying that itself is stifling progress. The
Well,
fact that
okay,
China
then you're
could
speaking
go to
about
war.
wars in general, but you don't imagine that in the absence. Listen, the most bloodshed we see, the biggest example of real war and real conflict that stifles individual potential are in fact wars in which there is no consolidated state. Civil wars, for example, China's era of warlordism, where there was no real central state, just competing and vying warlords. At least when it's a war between states, you mitigate that by sending the troops overseas and they're fighting in specific local areas. At least some segment of the population is free from the war. When there's no state, it's always a state of war all the time for everyone.
Yeah, but the state has the power to eliminate millions of people. A small warlord tribe, or whatever example you're using here, can't do
No,
that.
in the aggregate, millions die. In the aggregate, the sum total of all those small warlords and their conflicts lead to more or equal amount of death.
And what if those warlords were more centralized then? Then what? They would still have less power on average than the United States would, for example. They would never be able to create a nuclear weapon.
What you're talking about, for example, is the militaries of scale, which have overwhelming destructive power, like weapons of mass destruction. I don't see how privatizing anything would solve that problem. Why couldn't corporations, in your view, then possess WMDs, which they could themselves use? Because you can't blame states for war. War is something that will happen with or without states. So long as the underlying antagonisms responsible for war persist, there will be war.
Yeah, but to what scale is kind of my point. I mean, if there's two...
To what scale? Well, you can have the aggregate of chaos, small local instances of chaos, is probably more than between states.
Okay. Yeah, so like this guy in chat is saying Google should be allowed to...
Please speak up. I can't hear anything.
Alright.
I have my volume all the way.
Okay. So what I'm saying is...
Huh?
the state... Hello?
Yeah,
Can you
sorry,
hear me?
my Spotify was playing. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'm saying is the state there will never be a privatized organism that could ever create vast destruction like the states can. It never could happen. It would be individual skirmishes.
I agree with that, but the nuclear weapon, I agree, a private organization could have never developed something like nuclear weapons, but the weapons are here. So what's going to happen to them when the state is eliminated?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I can't predict the future, but I mean, someone's going to have hands on that. I'm guessing.
But
I don't know how that would.
The underlying antagonisms that endangered the necessity of nuclear weapons have persisted. So whether a state is going to take on that burden or something else is going to take on that burden, which inevitably will have to become a state, is different.
Okay. Well, my overall point is that we just need to allow individuals to maximize their abilities, and the states stifle that. States stifle that just with their policy. It could be unintended.
But I don't see what your point is. We agree that states, in collusion with established economic powers, stifle individual initiative. States, which act in the interests of the people at the expense of those powers, allow for the individual initiative to flourish. So I don't see what's so relevant about the state. It's not just the state that stifles the individual initiative. The key part is the established economic order in general and established economic interests and powers which do that.
Yeah, but it's not just economics that make the state so powerful. If it was, you know what I mean? It's not just economic. It's also other,
Well, the issue is not, it's not about how powerful the state is. It's to what extent does the state act to supplement economic powers, parasitic economic powers that need the state to subsist. That's the point. The reason why the American state is so powerful in stifling individual or small businesses, for example, is because because these big corporations would not survive on their own in a so-called free market. So they rely upon the big stick, the American state, to maintain their monopolies.
I don't agree with that. I mean, you can if the United States dissolved right now, Google would still be here in some form.
I promise you, I am willing to promise you something. If the United States dissolved, absolutely no big tech company would survive. Absolutely none of them. Not Google, none of them. Absolutely none.
They may not in the form that they're in right now.
No, they would not survive whatsoever. Do you know what a corporation is?
I mean, I know the corporation itself is a government.
No. I mean, like, yeah. What do you know what a corporation? What it means for a company to be incorporated?
Yeah, I mean, I do get it conceptually. I understand that the government that is a government.
Governments
sort of
incorporate
instrument.
companies.
Yeah, that's a government instrument. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, you can call it whatever you want. But I'm saying,
how would Google maintain anything? Google doesn't even have its own police force. If 50 homeless people ran into Google's headquarters naked, they have to call the police. You're saying if the whole American state collapsed, Google would still be around? No, they wouldn't.
Yeah, but I mean, so you're saying there are no security companies out now? You're saying there wouldn't be a market for
that was just an example of the way and how much Google depends not only on the federal government, but the local California, not only the local California government, the local city government.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is there would be a market for that, obviously. If it dissolved, there would be a market for it.
That's one thing. I'm trying to tell you, Google would not be able to survive. Google depends upon the U.S. government to survive.
Yeah, currently, but what I'm saying
is not currently. The whole organizational apparatus of the company and the corporation, how it pays its employees, the whole fucking thing from top to bottom would collapse. Nothing would be able to be sustained. Nothing. Google isn't just one guy hiring companies. Google is a system. It's a corporation from the shareholders down. None of that would be sustained because the underlying systemic matrices that they're coming from and they're operating within are defined by laws, defined by the institutions of the U.S. government.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that's how it's set up right now. But what I'm saying
it's not just right now. What central organ of Google would survive if the U.S. government collapsed? What is the central nucleus called Google which would survive all of the employees who have to be laid off? Because the underlying fucking institutional ability to hire people, the process of hiring people, the process of negotiating contracts with your employers. This is forgetting about the whole investors and all that kind of stuff, by the way, which alone would collapse the whole fucking thing. We're just going to assume the company's going to be able to operate without the shareholders and investors, which is a joke in and of itself. Do you understand how much laws permeate everyday economic life?
Yeah, I'm not saying that you would see Google.
How is Google going to define the extent and sphere in which it even owns property? Why should anyone respect Google's claims as to its ownership of property? That whole records of Google's property ownership is indexed by local and state and federal governments. What about Google's intellectual property? That's probably the biggest one. Who's going to enforce Google's intellectual property?
Well, I guess they would.
No, they wouldn't. They would have no way of doing that. Short of becoming a state in and of themselves. They would have no way of doing that. What is Google going to do? Put people on fucking Toyota trucks armed with machine guns and go attack small startups to enforce their intellectual? It's complete. What we are talking about is an absurdity right now. What we are talking about is literally an absurdity. The whole thing is an absurdity. I can't even believe I'm talking about it. It's so stupid.
I mean, yeah, of course, because this is a hypothetical.
But it's a stupid hypothetical. The idea that Google would survive if the U.S. government collapsed is the most stupid fucking thing I've ever heard. On Twitch. I'm not saying something. I've been on Twitch since when? February, March? This is the most stupid thing I've ever heard someone try to seriously argue.
I'm not saying, no, you're misquoting me. I'm not saying Google would exist in the state that it does now.
No, whatsoever. It doesn't have to be the state it exists now. Whatsoever. The idea that Google would exist whatsoever if the U.S. government collapsed is the most stupid fucking thing I have ever heard on the history of Twitch.
What I'm saying is there would be another form of Google.
How? What? Okay, for there to be another form of Google, we have to draw a distinction between the essence, the nucleus of Google, and the incidental, unimportant, inessential qualities and features. What is the permanent, survivable nucleus of Google that would survive? That would allow it to still be Google?
Well, I guess the infrastructure would
What
be there.
Infrastructure? The infrastructure, for example, is owned by The company's ownership over that infrastructure is only made possible because it's recognized by the government. So the infrastructure would still exist, but it wouldn't be Google's. It would belong to some fucking local warlord, not Google's.
I mean, I guess you could make that hypothetical, but we don't know that.
But how would Google exist at all? What would be Google? Who is Google if the U.S. government collapsed? What is Google? Who is they? Who are they?
I mean, individuals still have the ability to cooperate together to form what we would call a corporation. It wouldn't be necessarily
No, they don't, because a corporation is literally only something possible by a state. It's incorporated. It's not a corporation if there's no state, because it's not incorporated by anything.
Yeah, I understand that you're saying it wouldn't be recognized by others.
No, it would not be a corporation is what I'm saying. It would not be incorporated. Do you know what a corporation is?
I'm using the word corporation.
So you mean a company? You mean a company then? I mean, you're trying to say a company.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a corporation. It would be a company.
Yeah, well, I was using it, I was using
okay, a cooperative economic enterprise.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, what I'm saying is it wouldn't, you're making, yeah, of course. If
okay, let me ask you a question. This cooperative economic enterprise would not just have to be an economic enterprise. It would also have to create its own state, its own laws. It would have to have some kind of way to violently defend its property claims. And it would have to trade in some kind of universally recognized currency, which right now in the world does not exist. Now, I know you might say Bitcoin or something.
Yeah, there's cryptocurrency that
cryptocurrency, right? But who's going to create the infrastructure that allows the blockchain to even exist in the first place? That cannot be privately done. If warlords are running around with pickup trucks and machine guns shooting everything, how is there going to be a stable infrastructure network that's going to survive all that? Is everyone just going to agree, like in Pirates of the Caribbean, they're going to have the Pirates Code that we're just not going to fuck with the infrastructure that we're fighting over?
I mean, the so-called dismantled United States wouldn't be the only group of people using crypto. Like for Bitcoin, for example, it's computers from all over the world. So
listen to something. Crypto cannot exist. Crypto will never take off and become significant without government backing.
I mean, that might be the case now, but I'm saying Bitcoin already exists. Cryptocurrency.
Yeah, but Bitcoin is not traded. Bitcoin is not something people trade in.
What do you
Bitcoin
mean?
is an asset people use to store their money.
But they can trade if they chose to. That's just.
But it's completely inefficient to do it. It couldn't even replace gold in the past. Gold coins. And by the way, all coinage in history that's what governments did. Governments had a monopoly on coinage. It's one of the elementary things that defines a government was monopoly of coinage. It's never been done privately.
Okay, I mean, but that's with prior technology. We have
even with today's technology, I'm going to give you the situation right now. Cryptocurrency can only measure itself in regards to fiat currencies, specifically the dollar. So crypto has not yet actually replaced fiat or state-backed currencies. And you're not going to see a situation in which fiat simply collapses and there's just crypto. Because all money, regardless, it has nothing to do with technology, money is inherently tied to politics. Money is inherently tied to polities. That's why every state had a monopoly on coinage in the past. It's not just because of technology. Non-state entities could have possessed the same technology too. It's just that when you're trading, sovereign ownership of coinage is about taxation. That's why money came into being in the first place. It wasn't just because people were trading for no reason.
So you're against cryptocurrency. That's what you're saying.
No, I'm not. I'm not against it. I'm just saying cryptocurrency is going to be the future, but it's not going to be the future in the form of we're just going to have Bitcoin and nothing else. Cryptocurrency will probably take off in some kind of fusion between state banks like the Chinese State Central Bank and blockchain technology. But it's not going to happen with just, the dollar is going to disappear and the current monetary order is just going to disappear overnight and it's just going to be cryptocurrencies.
Okay, so for example, El Salvador is adopting or trying to adopt Bitcoin as their official currency. So what you're saying is it's not possible for them to do that. That's what you're saying.
No,
They're
I
not
don't
gonna be
think
able
El
to use.
Salvador is adopting it as their official currency. I think they're just doing something. They're recognizing it or something like that. But El Salvador is a state.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm saying I'm using them as a large scale example
And
of
it's
a
a
group.
state integrated within the global post-Bretton Woods global economy, now the petrodollar global economy.
Okay. Well, I mean, we're in this, free market
Yeah, as
society.
someone in my chat points out, El Salvador's currency is also backed by the dollar.
Yeah,
I get
of
it.
course.
Countries, when by the way, the countries leading this effort are socialistic aligned countries like Venezuela, China, and of course Russia, which is not socialist, and Iran, which is not socialist, but they're aligned with those countries. Cuba, all those countries are showing interest in getting off of reliance upon the US dollar in order to possess more national sovereignty and focusing more on cryptocurrencies. But it's not just going to be Bitcoin. There's probably going to be something new.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to debate.
I'm
these
just
things.
trying to explain to you the decisive significance of states in relationship to the possibility of what you call an economy or a free market.
I understand. It's hard to debate this with people because obviously I have to use hypotheticals in a sense because there's no free market society that we live in now. So of course you're going
And
to
there's
sound
never
stronger
been one in the history of mankind.
when you're using examples of what exists now. So
But
obviously
there's never one that existed in the history of mankind either.
Yeah, I know because there's people that always want power and then it turns into a state.
But at what point do you just stop complaining about that and you just accept that a state is an objective reality which cannot be childishly wished away but must be soberly accepted and dealt with and actually confronted as a reality? At what point do you draw the line and say, maybe it is futile to try and completely eliminate the state or abolish the state. Maybe I should recognize that the state, at least the one we have now, is an objective one and must be respected on those terms. The state is objective and therefore undergoes its own development in an objective way. You can pretend the state doesn't exist, so you can close your ears and close your mouth and pretend nothing exists. But ultimately, states exist, and they even survive the destruction of governments. Stalin has a great quote. He says, "The Hitlers of history come and go, but the German people and the German state survive." And Stalin said this because even despite the Nazi takeover of Germany, the German state, its continuity of laws, its continuity of governingship, its continuity of history somehow survives objectively. Even when the Nazis collapse, the continuity of the German state is continued. So there's something objective about states.
Yeah, I'm not saying
States are not
necessarily-
reducible to the current government you have. The current government or the current state machinery that's in place is not the same as the state as a real and objective historical continuity.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying to abolish it outright. I'm saying diminish it to a point where it's not the state that we recognize that it is now.
I agree with that, but I think only a communist party can do that.
But China can't be your example then because China's a very large.
But that's the dialectic. China's a very large state, which also diminishes the state bureaucratic red tape. It's a dialectic. It's not one or the other. It's not black or white.
You can't have a large state and also say that that large state provides individual freedoms. It's
You
just like it's a
precisely can. I am precisely saying that.
contradiction, though.
It's not a contradiction whatsoever. It's a perfectly reconciled reality within China. Well, I'm not saying China is a perfect society, but it's reconciled within China. China has a very big and powerful state, and it also has a minimalistic state, very pro-people state, when it comes to grassroots, local, and the little guy being able to participate in the economy. There's multiple examples of it. China is a very pro-people economy when it comes to taxation at the local level of small traders trading their farm produce. There's so many policies implemented or I should say, policies removed that just allow people to get on and live their life without all this intervention and haranguing and harassment by these big states. Taxes are low in China for people. It's like, but you need a very strong and powerful state to make all of that possible.
Yeah, but taxes still exist. And
of course they do. They have to exist.
Yeah, but taxes in and of itself, saying that taxes are lower in China than the U.S., for example, doesn't mean anything. That doesn't necessarily
listen, let me tell you something. A state without taxes is no state at all.
Well, yeah, obviously the governments are going to force.
But you told me that your goal is to minimize the state, not to abolish it. Well, if a state is existing, there's going to be taxes.
Yeah, but the taxes aren't small in comparison to like the average person's income. It's still 20%.
No, taxes in China are very small for regular ordinary people. They're very small.
So you're saying it doesn't impact them whatsoever economically, the individual?
I don't really think it does in China. No.
So what are the taxes? How low are they?
I think it depends on the region and the locale, but the Chinese taxes are not a burden for ordinary people. There are other burdens, but taxes are not one of them.
Okay, so overall, what you're saying is you don't disagree with libertarians in the sense that the U.S. state is sort of not in a great state. You don't disagree there.
It's not a what?
You don't disagree that the United States is not in a great place. You don't disagree there.
No, I don't disagree.
You're saying that libertarians they're more utopian in the sense that there's no way to be.
That's my point. My point is not that libertarians have ill intentions. It's that they're too utopian about their intentions. They're utopian in the same way you have utopian communists who think that you can just eliminate markets or commodities overnight, and you can just have private anything overnight, and who think that the state can be abolished overnight. So I consider it the same type of utopianism.
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily think the state can be abolished overnight. I don't even think you can abolish the state as it currently is now. There's no individual libertarian that's strong enough to be able to dismantle the United States, for example. But you can cut down on policies and large government red tape that we have now. So
okay, I don't disagree, but what I disagree about is how that would be done.
I mean, I guess in the current system, you would have to have politicians that agree to cutting down. Like Ron Paul, for example. He was really against, a lot of.
But what happened to him?
What?
What happened to Ron Paul?
Well, I mean, obviously the deep state's gonna, just do the same thing they did to Bernie. But
yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, but I'm saying we could hypothetically have more.
And let me tell you another critique I have of Ron Paul. It wasn't just the deep state. Ron Paul was never able to muster the ability to build a genuine people's movement and alternative, because Ron Paul was basically just a kind of conservative in the sense that he just was against encroachments that the government was making, but he never proposed an alternative government vision of his own.
Well, I think in some of his, writings and whatnot, he has mentioned more of his ideal.
Right, society. But I'll give you an example. Trump, for example, I am against Trump, obviously, but the reason Trump was successful and Ron Paul wasn't was because Trump built some kind of movement with some kind of specific vision about state power. One that I disagree with, to preface. But that's why Ron Paul was unsuccessful compared to Trump.
Okay. I mean, but Trump is just an establishment guy.
Of course, I agree. But the point I'm trying to say is that I don't think that you're going to be able to break the current reigning monopoly capital in collusion with the state. I don't think you're going to be able to cut down on the state bureaucracy and red tape that exists both on the federal and state level and all of this ugly corruption. I don't think you're going to be able to get rid of this without a strong and powerful people's movement. And My idea for this movement is a revived communist party.
I mean, from what you're saying, it doesn't sound too bad. If you're telling me that the state can is not going to be corrupt and they're going to be able to facilitate individuals to be able to trade.
That's what you're definitely saying. A people's state, a state that serves the people and allows the people to flourish instead of keeping them down.
I mean, it sounds idealistic in a sense, because I don't think that's what actually happens in reality. It's probably sort of like China, for example. That's what they pitch, but I'm not sure that's how it actually works.
Well, it's not in a one-sided way, because like I said, there does exist corruption in China, but there also exists anti-corruption campaigns. I am not of the view that you're going to create a utopia and then everything's going to be fine. It's an active process which never ends.
So you're saying a sort of a small revolution every single time there's a batch of corruption. That's
sure, not just every time there's a batch of corruption, but whenever there's a consolidation of some kind of establishment in general, yes, you do have a social or cultural revolution. But this revolution doesn't always have to lead to the overthrow or collapse of the state. It can be a more subtle type of revolution, like the revolution of the Xi era recently. And this is a revolution that's happening in China now. It's just not one that's resulted in violence or the complete overthrow of the Chinese state.
All right. Well, I mean, from what it
in Maoism, there's an idea of a antagonistic and non-antagonistic contradiction. In a non-antagonistic contradiction, you still have a great struggle and you still have a conflict, but it doesn't realize itself in overt and explicit forms of violence and conflict and all this, and direct armed conflict and even street conflict and this kind of stuff. It's a more subtle type of struggle and conflict.
All right. Well, I mean, it sounds great. Again, it sounds great, but what you're explaining to me now could be just as idealistic as a libertarian society.
I think it's less, but the reason I think it's less idealistic is because despite that China is not a perfect society, China exists, and it's an example we can look to as a society that has more or less succeeded in this.
Well, I would need proof for that, but you can.
I recommend you learn more about China then. If you want to see an example of a successful version of a society that I'm talking about. And by the way, this isn't my ideal. I'm saying all this because I learned from China and how it works.
I don't see entrepreneurs from all over the world moving to China.
Because they're not Chinese. China exists for the Chinese people.
Okay, so you're saying that, so the Chinese state can stifle individuals from moving across borders. You're saying I'm just saying China doesn't have an obligation to make the country more amicable to foreigners rather than its own people. I'm not saying it has to, but I'm saying that they are stifling a potential, I guess, interaction or transaction.
I don't think so. That would otherwise, I guess, I don't think so, because China's cities, for example, are very diverse and full of people from foreign countries. But here's the thing. Most countries in this world are not like America, where it's like a melting pot and everyone all across the world comes and moves there. Moving to another country is hard. You have to learn their culture, you have to learn their language, you have to learn all this kind of customs and stuff. America doesn't really have its own particular culture. So that's why it's easy for people to move across the world to America, because in America, it's kind of a culturally neutral place. But it's much harder to move to China. It's much harder to move to the Middle East. It's much harder to move to India. It's much harder to move to, even Russia. It's hard to move to Eastern Europe. It's hard to move to Europe too, in general. And we see the immense conflict that immigration has created in Western Europe. So not everywhere is going to be like America, where people are, all across the world are moving there.
Yeah, of course, but I'm saying because they're stifling individuals like
no, that's not. It's not, and it's not because the government is stifling individuals. Just because it's a different place with a different people, a different culture, a different language, different values, a different way of life.
Yeah, of course. I understand their justification for it. What I'm saying, though, is...
No, it's not a justification. It's an objective fact. Even if there's no government in Somalia, is it okay to move there?
I mean, a person can move there. I'm not sure...
They can, But is the non-existent government in Somalia stopping people from going there? Or maybe it's because there's other reasons.
Well, I mean, people might not want to move there because it's not going to be profitable.
Okay.
But if it was profitable, people would move there.
Listen, the idea of open borders existing freely and unmitigated movement of peoples, were it not for government restrictions, is a myth. There's no such thing. Because let me tell you something. To even travel, airplanes are out of the question because airports and all that kind of stuff, those don't exist without governments, right? Air travel, regulation, all that kind of stuff, that's not possible without governments. So we would have to travel by boat. It's just not economical for people to just do that at the scale you're talking about. It's not.
I mean, I don't know why you would say that there would be no air travel with that.
There wouldn't, because we don't want to get into this discussion. Because, first of all, airport security, you need federal state regulations. Regulations about aircraft being safed, you need federal regulations. And before you say let the free market decide, I don't think fucking people want to be the test subjects to see which planes work and which ones don't. I think they just want the planes to fucking work before they even think about stepping foot on them.
I mean, if a company is known to have bad airplanes, people would stop.
Yeah, but how are you going to be known to have bad airplanes if not, people stepping on, someone's going to have to be sacrificed, and I don't think people want to be sacrificed.
Yeah, they would.
I don't listen. Look, I'm trying to help you, even though I don't have any obligation to. Like I said in the beginning, I'm trying to help you right now. Please do not try to sit here and argue for a free market of airplanes, okay?
No, we can go here because...
we have to... Okay, let's go here then. Please, let's go here.
All right, well, first, people already die in airplanes now.
Okay, but much more would die if there was a free market of airplanes.
You don't know that.
Yes, I do know that. Because the fucking federal regulations, which are a burden and expense on these companies, would not be in place. And you would see a lot of tragedies and horrible things happening that just don't need to exist.
There are markets out there that there are...
Listen, it's less expensive to make a shitty plane than one that complies with federal regulations. So yeah, somewhere along the line, there's going to be a problem, okay?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is we would have more efficient planes.
No, you wouldn't. I don't think you would. A plane is a very simple fuck. Do you even know, like, how planes are made? Do you actually think planes are like fruit? You think planes are like... No, planes require a lot of institutional... infrastructural, just to make them, requires so much of that, right?
Yeah.
And that alone relies on the government. The institutions that educate all this, the network, everything. You need government to make planes.
You know there are private plane companies now, right? Like, this isn't some abstract thing.
Yes, I know they're private, but I'm saying they can't exist without the government.
I mean, the government is currently involved in all of these things. But
we can agree. Okay, but then if we get to the piece by piece, every single way in which they're dependent on the quote unquote current government, at one point you're gonna find yourself having to stretch to say that private companies can replace everything.
Yeah, I mean, again, you can't prove your statements. I mean, it can sound great, but I'm
trying to have a reasonable, common sense discussion with you. I don't want to have to get to the point of proof because it's going to be so humiliating for you. So let's just focus on common sense.
All right, we'll just move on. All right.
Let's focus on common sense. All right. A free market of airplanes is a very silly idea. Okay?
Okay. All right, well, in that case, like I said, even if it does have to come to a point where the government would have to put, regulation in place, it would be very simple. It would not be, thousands and thousands of pages of laws.
I don't know to what extent federal aviation regulations are too burdensome or not. I think it would have to be investigated, but I'm just trying to tell you that we got to this point because I talked about how air travel can't exist without governments.
Yeah, again, if we're gonna say, I just want to strip down as much regulation as possible. So if you're telling me that air travel has to have government, then let's have some regulation in place.
Okay, but then my point was, government is not stifling people from moving to China. Because if there was no government within China, there wouldn't even be any airplanes to be able to travel there.
Okay, but I mean, I'm talking about what exists now. So we have travel now. So what I'm saying is, even if we had a situation where the United States,
okay, how is China stifling people from moving? It doesn't make any sense to me. What is it stifling then? Why does China? So you think you're entitled to China? That's my issue right now. You're not entitled to China's territory.
I'm not saying China has to do anything. I'm saying objectively, China does.
So China's stifling your rights, your natural God-given rights, by making it harder for you to move to China and make a living there.
Yeah, I mean,
no, because China doesn't fucking belong to you.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is, China is objectively stifling an entrepreneur's ability to move there if they chose.
Okay, but that entrepreneur has no entitlement to the territory of China.
Yeah, but why does the state get to determine that?
Because states serve the people, and states define the extent to which people own their country.
Or you're saying the average person?
You're saying countries should no longer exist, and businessmen should be able to carve up the world according to how much money they have at the expense of people's tradition. You realize states and borders, right? Borders are defined by war. Borders are defined by sacrifice. Borders are defined by history, tradition, culture. All of this is meaningless to you.
I mean, I think the individual right for people to be able to move freely is more important than everything you just mentioned.
Who guarantees this right, if not a supra-global state of some kind, which dissolves the realities of each and every nation and country into thin air and says that it's a free-for-all?
I mean, again, we would go to hypothetical, and that question would lead us to a hypothetical situation. So.
Listen, people will never accept this. People will never accept this. The people will never accept this.
Again, I'm not saying make the entire world stateless. I'm saying we can start with the U.S., for example, or even if U.S. isn't not an good example.
You need to realize, anomaly, you're a citizen of America. America is your home. You have a say in America. China does not belong to you. You have no right to China. You have no right to any other country.
Okay, so yeah, I mean,
this is the country you are legally a citizen of.
Yeah, that's how it is right now. Yeah.
This is the country you have tradition and your culture and your whole being comes from. Just like your mother gave birth to you, that's your mother. This is the land that gave birth to you. You understand?
I mean, you're saying that, but land. I mean, this is just a piece of land. It's not.
No,
anything.
It's the land that gave birth to you. It's the air you breathe. It's the food you eat. It's the place you grew up in. It's the people you know. It's everything that defines you.
I've lived in like 10 different countries before. So
okay.
Just because I was born here, that doesn't
well,
necessarily...
then it's a matter of the laws, because we need some kind of laws to determine this.
What I'm saying is I was able to travel.
Maybe you're less homegrown than others, but legally speaking, you're an American.
Okay. So what? That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have the ability to move.
You have no business in any other country in terms of having the right to do this or that. That's up to the people of that country and its government. And the government that they assent to.
Okay. Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good
your
thing.
problem is that you're making it seem like nations and states don't exist. And that's fine and well, ideally, but to a Chinese person, you're a foreigner. You come from a foreign state and a foreign country. So for you to say you want to have the unconditional right to do whatever you want in China as an entrepreneur at the expense of the Chinese people,
right? I'm not saying that. I'm not forcing it on them. I'm saying that.
No, I'm saying, but you're saying they're stifling your right, and you have a right to China.
No,
you don't have any such right.
No, I'm saying I should have the right to be able to move to wherever I want. I'm not saying that I do, but I should.
You should. How could it be a right if it's just a matter of should?
I mean, we can.
You think rights? Okay, then what is a right? Is right? Then if it's just should, then according to your own words, a right is something rather than natural and God-given, something purely instantiated in the state's recognition. The state grants you your rights and your not rights. You're saying you should have the right rather than you have the right. If you should have the right, who's going to give you that right?
Well, I mean, right now it would be the state, obviously, but that's because.
So who will give you the right?
What?
Who will give you the right?
Well, I mean, right now it's the state, right?
So you want the state to give you the right as an entrepreneur to move to China and do whatever you want?
Well, I mean, objectively, that's how it would work, right? If someone wants to move to the U.S., the U.S. has to accept them. I'm saying countries should be able or should allow people to be able to move wherever they want.
Why? The Chinese state exists for the Chinese people.
Yeah, but I don't agree.
Those are the people it actually has a material foundation in, and it knows and it's accustomed to, and it came from. The Chinese state has nothing to do with people.
You're basically.
The Chinese state has nothing to do with people living in Idaho.
Yeah, but you're basically romanticizing like someone's birthplace, which
I'm not romanticizing it. I'm telling you the plain truth.
Yeah, but
a state is not just an abstraction. It doesn't come out of thin air. A state comes from a people, and it's a reflection of a people. Like you look in the mirror, that's a reflection of you. A state is a reflection of a people.
I mean, explain the U.S. then. Because cities that I live in...
The U.S. is the best example because the U.S. is a state which pretends to be completely abstract universal, but as we can see, it's a highly racialized state. It's a highly culturalized state. It has highly particular features. Anglo-American features, African-American, Latino-American. You know, all of these specific determinate people define the American state.
Yeah, but the cities I live in, I see people from all across the world.
But your cities are not the majority. The majority of the American people, whether they're black, white, or Latino, have culture, tradition, and roots here.
Okay. I mean, I'm not seeing this. I'm not sure. Maybe the country folk, maybe.
You're not seeing this? Do you know that black people have roots and tradition in the Black Belt, which is what it's called historically in the South, the Black Belt? And that, do you know about Appalachia? Do you know about how the countryside is the other half of the whole fucking population? And that the people in the cities, by and large, came from the countryside? And that, yes, there's other immigrants and foreigners and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, maybe people aren't freely moving, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't and that they shouldn't be able to.
Do you not know what is the American state? Do you know what the American state is?
What do you mean by that?
It's built after the Civil War. The state as we know it.
Yeah, okay.
What defined the South during the Civil War and before? The slaveocracy.
Yeah.
Slave owners owning slaves, the plantation economies, all of this stuff. All of these are national particularities which define the fabric of the American state. So no, the American state is not just an abstraction.
Okay, well, again, you used these areas of the regions of the U.S. as examples, but like I said,
what you're saying is like what Joe Biden said. Joe Biden said America is the only country founded on an idea. It's not true. It's not founded on an idea. There's a material, objective reality.
Okay. Again, the point is, every place I'm using my common sense, what I've seen from my existence. I see people from all over the world in the cities I live in, and I
those are cities. There's people from all over the world in Shanghai. There's people, but that doesn't reflect the country.
I mean, it's part of a country. So but
that's not the material basis of a state. The country is a country. The people. Do you even know what it's meant by the people? What is meant by the people is not college student baristas. The people is meant by the people, the real people.
So you're saying city people don't exist. That's what you're saying.
No, but listen, I don't want to have a geographical conversation about it because it's complicated. Cities in America are what they call megalopolises. If they're not just cities, they're also they have their own dynamic of subalterns and metropoles. Like LA, for example. LA LA's black and Latino communities are not cosmopolitan, people from all over the world. But they're in cities, but they're not cosmopolitan.
I mean, yeah, maybe that's the case. That's probably true. But
So cities, what I'm trying to tell you is that the majority of any given country is not going to be people from all over the world.
all I'm saying is countries should replicate how cities are, where we're able
But
to freely move.
it's not possible and never be possible.
It might not be, but
Because
I'm saying
even
that's how it
cities
should be.
themselves replicate the dynamics of countryside versus metropole. Inevitably. Even cities do that. For example, New York and LA and these big megalopolises.
I mean, that might be true.
Even
but
cities develop their own countryside of quote unquote homogeneous cultural communities, which is not this kind of melting pot.
I don't care about the melting pot for the sake of culture or anything like that. I'm saying an individual who wants to profit, who wants to make money, should be able to move to wherever they want, so that they can, they can start businesses. And
Why should they?
You
What
said why?
claims do they have on that land?
Well, I mean, again, in this reality,
Do you know that a businessman has feet? This feet walks over something, not thin air. It's called land. Who owns land? How is that land owned? The problem of the tension landed property has posed to capitalism is an issue so significant, the whole school of classical political economy was built in an attempt to address and resolve this problem. How can we solve the issue of land? How can we make the land part of the free market? And they've never succeeded.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with you that it's a difficult concept to think up, but doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't be thinking of these things and outright just letting the state.
No, I've just thought of it now, but it's so stupid that it went out the other ear.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I'm probably not the first libertarian that you've talked to, so you
are. I think you are.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, my whole point is that individuals should have rights. You can't tell me what to do, just like I can't tell you what to do.
An individual is part of a greater whole. Just like you have a mother and you didn't give birth to yourself.
Okay, but now I exist, and I should have the right to do what I want, and you should have the right to do what you want. I shouldn't be able to tell you.
There is no such thing as an unconditional right to do whatever you want.
Yeah, it doesn't exist now, but
it can never exist.
I mean, it can.
No, it can't, because in addition to social limit and not only familial and communal, but also social restrictions on the sphere of doing what you want to do, there's also objective and natural ones.
Okay.
It's very childish what you're saying.
I mean, what I'm saying is conceptually. So you're telling me I should be able to come down and tell you what to do. I should be able to rule over you, is what you're saying.
What do you mean by that?
If I happen to be...
No, you're an individual. A state is not an individual.
I mean, individuals aren't the only ones that rule over other people in the sense that corporations do. Corporations also do that.
Families do too.
Yeah, families do too, exactly. So I mean, I guess to a sense, families, you have to have that. But what I'm saying is, me as an individual should not have to force you to do anything. You should be able to do what you want.
Okay, wait. But here's the issue. You as an individual are a private interest. So for you to exercise your authority over me, another private individual, would mean that you're exercising some arbitrary power to limit and stifle, and in this undignified way, my private interests, even though we're both equals. But a state is not a private interest. It's precisely not a private interest. So if the state is not a private interest, it does not act over you as though another private individual is. My job as a private individual is to do what? It's to live my life, make a living, find a girl, marry her, have a family, raise kids, whatever, right? Just like you're a man. That's what you're here for, right?
Exactly. Okay, yeah.
That's not the state's job. The state's job is to make sure we have a society that makes this possible.
Okay.
So if a state is ruling over me, it's not the same as if just some other man ruling over me.
But individuals exercise the state power to rule over us. So individuals are the ones that are coming down and enforcing this on us. It's not the concept of the
individual state. Actors are the instrument of state. But no, states are not reducible to individuals. They're not.
I mean, but who are the ones that are actually implementing these things?
It's no single one person.
I mean, it might not be, but that police officer that arrests you, he represents the state, but
yeah,
he is the one enforcing it. He's the one enforcing it.
Yeah. But the whole state power is not reducible to him.
So now I see that as an individual.
A state is a shared convention, external convention. The metaphysics of statehood and its true substance is an old topic. Is the state just a collection of individuals, or is it a super-organic whole that individuals are merely a part of? This is a kind of metaphysical question. But if we rely on our common sense, we can see the state is not just individuals or the sum total of private individual interests. It's some kind of external objective interest.
I mean, you can say that, but I'm saying individuals don't see it that way when it happens to them. If a police officer...
of course, but here's the kicker here. One of the reasons for that is because in America, for example, we all see the state as a private interest. That we see the government specifically as a private interest. We don't see it as a people's state. We see it as a government completely alienated from any of us. It doesn't serve our interests. It serves the interests of men in dark suits who we will never have any idea who they are. And they exist at our expense. This is how people see the state in capitalistic, or you don't like that word, monopolistic, imperialistic countries.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I don't totally disagree with that, but what I'm saying, so you're saying countries like China don't do that, is what you're saying?
I don't think so. No, I think in China there's a strong sense that it is a people's state. It's a state that exists whose only existence is to serve the people.
So when that individual cop kills or arrests a Chinese citizen for whatever reason,
what often happens in China is that when a cop is bothering a person, crowds of people will gather around and basically tell the cop, "What are you doing? Leave him alone."
Here, though. That happens in America, though.
Not really.
I mean, the protests like over the summer last year. That
was over one instance. That's just because that was the boiling point. Because that happens so often in America.
I mean, that wasn't the only one, though. There's been others.
No, I know, but the protests, I'm not talking about massive street protests. I'm talking about the fact that in China, they don't have the same culture of cops arbitrarily bothering people for no reason. Now, there was an example of that I knew of earlier in the 2000s and early 2010s. There was migrants from the Chinese countryside who would reside in cities without hukou permits. And there was a specific police force that was pretty hard on them. But the Chinese people are, they have an internal discussion and debate about these things, and I'm not familiar with the same thing happening anymore.
Okay, well, I mean, you're saying these things, and it sounds great in face value, but I don't think that's how it actually turns out in reality. I think a lot of times people still...
No, I'm telling you the reality. I'm telling you the reality. The reality is... China's not perfect. I'm sure when people in China are arrested, it doesn't feel good, but it's not the same. But here's the thing, especially in Asian countries in general. If you're arrested in China, you do not experience this as one other man unjustly exercising themselves over you. There's a profound social shame accompanying it. It's the whole society is against you. You as an individual did something wrong, and society's punishing you. Like when you're in school, when you're in elementary school, and you get embarrassed in front of the whole class. Is one individual embarrassing you? No, you feel ashamed in front of everyone, in front of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that Asian countries tend to be more collectivistic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that individuals still don't feel impacted by state state force. They still do.
Okay, but state force in China does not exist as a separate individual private interest. It's a organic, collective, national interest of the whole people.
I mean, that's what the government says, but that doesn't mean that it's.
But in China, no one says as an individual, I am the people. The people are the greater whole. The people is someone I don't know who lives in a province I've never been to. That's the people. The people is something bigger than you. Even though you're a part of it, you're not a part of it in a way that is immediately clear to you.
So you're saying that legally, or you're saying that...
No, in general. In general.
So you're saying people in the U.S., for example, don't feel that? They don't feel a community? You're saying locals don't have community? Is that what you're saying?
I think there is a incredibly diminishing sense of community within the United States, especially.
Yeah, but I mean, that's sort of a metric that you're measuring, like out in the open, right? You're not. There's nothing on paper that can measure that.
You disagree?
Well, I mean, I agree that China is probably more collectivistic than U.S. is. Just how
I think that Americans are, especially among the countries in the world, have a terminal sense of lacking any community.
Yeah, I mean, that might be true. America tends to be more individualistic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that when impacted by a state force, state action, that individuals still don't see it.
So hold on.
Like a Chinese person doesn't say, "Hey, I was arrested by the cops," but they still see that cop that arrested them as an individual. They don't see it.
No, because I mean, maybe in a case of corruption where there's like a personal feud with a cop, that might be the case. But in general, no. I mean, no, not really. They're gonna see it as you ran afoul with the law, as they say in America. No one just individualizes everything.
Okay.
But anyway, Anomaly.
Yeah.
You sent me an email. You said you're going to quickly destroy me.
Well, I mean,
it's been 2 hours. It's been 2 hours.
Okay.
So at least we can agree unambiguously that you got half of it wrong. You didn't quickly destroy me. Whether you destroyed me, I'll leave it for the chat to decide. I strongly suspect you didn't do that.
Well, I mean, your chat's going to always agree with you.
Okay, but I personally strongly suspect that neither you nor anyone else could ever honestly come to the conclusion you destroyed me in anything.
Well, I mean, in these sort of conversations, destroy is sort of a...
Do you have So I'm going to ask you now.
Okay.
You came on here with the purpose of quickly destroying me.
Okay.
Do you have a trick up your sleeve that I haven't heard for the past 2 hours that's going to destroy me?
I mean, we can talk about something else. I'm not.
No. Give me your hammer. Give me the punch that's going to destroy me. Because you promised to come on here and destroy me. That's what you promised to do.
Yeah, I mean, overall,
and you promised to do it quickly, and you failed to do that for the past 2 hours.
Well,
so in good faith, I'm just going to assume you've been saving it. So please, let me hear the destruction.
All right, well, what I'm going to say is, the United States I hope the United States, in my ideal world, the U.S. will be, more of a libertarian country, like I said.
That doesn't destroy me whatsoever.
Less laws, and I would like to see the United States, they're going to still be the hegemonic power, they're going to still...
Okay, how old are you? How old are you?
I'm 23.
Oh... I was hoping you said you were going to say 17, 16.
No.
That makes this more painful, my friend.
I mean, wait, how old are you?
I'm only about a year or two older than you.
Okay.
Let me tell you something. I can't believe I have to act like an old man, like your father giving you advice. Do not send someone an email promising to destroy them when you don't even know who the fuck they are and are not familiar with anything they've ever said.
Yeah, I just had some of your fans in my Discord.
I don't care. I'm not controlling my fans. I control myself. You're an individualist, right? So be consistent. Yeah. You're going to make an ass of yourself. I don't know why I'm showing you all this mercy, because I could be going hard on you right now. But you caught me at it when I'm in a merciful mood. So I'm just going to give you this advice. Don't be acting stupid, Anomaly.
What do you mean?
Don't be talking all this shit and then coming short.
I mean, when you say, I mean, but how you would never admit to being destroyed even if you perceived.
I would never use that language to someone I don't know. I tell the breadtube people I'm going to destroy them because I do know who they are. I'm very familiar with what they say, and I'm very confident I'm going to destroy them.
So you're saying that? So have you ever admitted to a defeat? Have you ever lost?
I've never lost a debate.
Yeah, have you ever lost a debate? That's what
Never.
Yeah, so you would never admit it, even if you did. If another community...
No, because I've admitted I was wrong about specific points before.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you conceded the debate entirely.
No, I've never conceded a debate.
Yeah, exactly. So you'll always say that you won. So I mean,
you can't extrapolate that. That's the black swan myth or fallacy, right? Just because you've never seen a black swan means there is none? No, you just never seen one.
No, I mean, I haven't gone through all your debates, but I'm guessing there's probably...
No, I'm trying to say is that even if I never lose a debate in my life, that doesn't mean I'm unwilling to concede that I lost one if I do lose one in the future.
I mean, based on the past,
Look,
I guess...
anomaly, I get it. It's about personal pride. I'm trying to give you the advice. Don't put your fucking pride on the line like this and say you're going to destroy someone because they're going to steal your manhood and take it away and make you look like a fucking idiot.
I mean, I don't
gamble with your manhood.
I don't think you could ever have a debate with the Libertarian where you think you would have lost. I don't think you could. I think you would always think you won. And
I don't care what you think. I'm trying to give you this advice.
Okay. Is that it?
Don't gamble with your manhood.
I don't think I did.
Don't gamble with your... Yes, you did. You did precisely that. Don't gamble with your dignity. I could have been way meaner to you this whole thing.
I mean, you could have been if you wanted to.
Yeah.
I never,
you see how I treat the breadtube people?
Yeah, I know.
So don't gamble with your manhood, because somebody, not me, somebody's going to make you look really stupid and humiliate you in front of 300 people.
I mean, I do like these conversations, right? Because I learn new things. I didn't know much of your perspective.
Oh, I agree. You didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so some of the things you said sounded good about China, and whatnot, and so
okay.
I'll look into that stuff. I'll look into it, but
okay, look into it.
And I guess that's when we find out who won actually, right? Because if
debates happen during debates, not after the debate.
I mean, yeah, that's true, but. I mean, still, people that out there listening will determine, I guess.
You're right. I agree. The people listening will determine.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, it was good. Nice talking to you.
Okay.
All right.